Everybody, welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, June the 5th. Go ahead and share my screen. We can talk a little bit about the agenda for today. To start, we're going to show off a new capability provider written in Go that allows for KV access to Couchbase DB. This is a hot off the press new provider, so it should be fun to show a little bit of demo and then talk about it. We're also going to talk about one of the foundational things of this new provider, which is a custom provider template for Go. It's especially built with the provider SDK for you to make your own capability provider in Go. And then we'll talk about the up and coming WASH 0.29. That should be coming out hopefully a little later today. We'll talk about some things that happened in the wasmCloud org around something that slowed us down a little earlier this week around merging PRs, just to give you all a heads up. And then do our roadmap check-in, and we should have a little bit of time should have plenty of time for questions and for comments and all that good stuff. So why don't we go ahead and get started with Couchbase? So I'm not sure how many of you have used Couchbase before. I was working with the Go SDK, so that's what comes up first. But Couchbase is it's a variety database. You can use multiple different interfaces in order to interact with Couchbase. You can use like a NoSQL document DB type interface, a SQL query type interface. You can use a key value type interface for getting documents or JSON blobs. We've got a lot of different things. But one of the things that we worked on actually with Couchbase maybe about a year ago was a capability provider that used the wasmCloud key value interface and connected to a Couchbase database that you could run locally. Now, what I was able to do, I was able to work with the Couchbase folks and figure out, well, one, kind of the best way to run Couchbase locally with their little Couchbase server thing. It's just a Docker container that you run. Let's see. I think I've got that running. Yeah, you just run the little Docker container. It's pretty easy. And then you can set up a little database, and I've got a couple fields or a couple documents in this database. So I'll go ahead and start with I'll start with the dopamine just to show off the demo. Right now, if I curl localhost 8080 and we hit the Couchbase endpoint, see we get a nice little counter. Couchbase 21, 22, 23. We're doing a little increment on this field. This is great. We've got this little persistent application. This is actually being hosted from wasmCloud. If we take a look at actually what is running here, we have the HTTP key value counter. This is the application that we wrote in Rust that just takes HTTP requests and then uses WASI key value to increment a field in a database. And we have a Couchbase provider. Now you can do that atomic increment. You can also use the WRPC key value testing utility that's in the key value or the WRPC organization to fetch data in and out of Couchbase. So, right there we were incrementing a value in this database, which is just a single number. We also have a document in here under the key of foo, and we can use the testing utility to fetch the information out of this database, send a WRPC invocation to say, get this value. We can also send information, or we can set data in this Couchbase database. So if we call this like wasmCloud, we can call the store.set function with this little document. And I haven't figured out a better way to refresh this other than just refreshing, but we can see we have the new wasmCloud field here, and this is actually just structured JSON document. So this is essentially getting to work with this running Couchbase capability provider directly, and I was able to use the example component to do that. So great, working Couchbase provider. What I actually want to talk about a little bit more is how we set this up. So I have this I have this provider, which was built from our wasmCloud provider SDK in Go. And all it is doing is implementing the WRPC, which is the same as WASI, key value store and atomics interface. So these are the well-known wasmCloud key value interfaces. If we take a look in the main file for this capability provider, the code is actually really simple to be able to turn like a Go binary into a provider. So we've got a couple of callbacks around handling when something links to this capability provider or to handle a health check. But the real piece of initialization that I do here is accept on configuration, the bucket to connect to a connection string, a username, and a password. And then I just use the Couchbase Go SDK to connect to a Couchbase cluster and then get the default collection there. Now, as soon as I declared that I exported the key value store and atomics interface, it requires me the wasmCloud provider SDK and the WRPC client requires me to implement these handler functions. So in order to, when I'm calling get, when I get a key out of the Couchbase database, all I do is pull the value from this key and use the Couchbase collection get API to pull a document out of the database. So this is essentially just a lightweight wrapper around the Couchbase Go SDK. So if anybody is interested in taking a look at this, we actually have an initial version of this up in the Couchbase Labs repository under wasmCloud Provider Couchbase. I don't know why Zoom is doing this to me today. Oh, hey, there we go. Nice. I did actually find it. You can go ahead and take a look there. And we're going to be working a little bit more in this repository to provide more specific wit to the Couchbase API so that you can access a little bit more like specific functionality to Couchbase. But it is really, really cool to see this working directly like the KV interface with WASI key value. And it's just another example of extending the base wasmCloud with another capability. So if you are a user of Couchbase, this should provide to be a really nice abstraction for connecting to the KV interface if that matches your use case. Do folks have any questions about the specific the Couchbase implementation here for the wasmCloud provider?
No, it's really cool to see the provider being written in Go. You know, seems like it's that polyglot future we want.
Oh yeah. Well, oh yeah. Liam, go for it.
Brooks, Couchbase supports a lot of different operational modes. This is the Couchbase KV. What are your thoughts around other modes of operation? What might those look like?
It's a great question, Plant Liam. We are, when you look at Couchbase, essentially what I've done for this phase of the capability provider is Zoom, please stop. Thank you. I just wanted to get back to this view. For this phase of the capability provider, essentially what I wanted to do was create a connector to Couchbase using a well-known interface, WASI key value. So doing it in this way, if we think of the API as already being set with WASI key value, that means that all of our examples that we have in wasmCloud for WASI key value can now just use Couchbase as a database backend, which is great. Realistically, moving past some of the examples, I think that people evaluate database vendors and companies like Couchbase to use them in their applications because of the specific functionality that they have. So, they specifically want to use the KV interface, for example, to query documents. So they very specifically want to use like sub-document queries or full text search. So I think moving on from here, this example with WASI key value is really great to have for the portability aspect. But I think that a specific Couchbase wit, which essentially instead of going from a well-defined interface and then kind of wrapping the Couchbase SDK with that, matching it one-to-one, the Couchbase SDK to a wit interface will let you work with Couchbase like you normally do with an SDK in your application. And then going from there, you still get all the benefits of loose coupling from a capability provider. You just made the choice to pick Couchbase as your database. And I think, I mean, at some point, the abstraction you get more benefit by actually picking a specific implementation there. That answer your question, Liam?
Thanks, Brooks. That did answer my question. And actually, I really like the strategy of starting with, like the first layer of compatible with, like the unified abstraction layer, and then double clicking down into the highly coupled layer. I think that may be a good roadmap for onboarding, any database or, any platform, going forward when we think about how we might do this. For all the reasons you mentioned, I thought that was really clever roadmap. Thank you.
All righty, got some hands. Vance.
So did you show the WIT interface actually not using WASI directly, but using WRPC?
Yes.
I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, let me talk through that a little bit. So this is something, there's actually a new issue that I'm going to pull up at the end of talking about this. If you take a look at the WASI key value store and WASI, well, why don't we go ahead and do it? WASI key value. If we take a look at the WASI key value interface directly, we'll take a look at, I think Atomic is actually fine, but if we look at store, store actually has the bucket represented as a resource. So this makes sense. You kind of open a bucket, and that is a specific resource, something with a specific lifetime, and you call functions on that resource, like getting a key out of that bucket or setting a key in that bucket. Now, when it came to wasmCloud 1.0 and implementing things for the first time, implementing resources over WRPC was something that we did and know how to do. However, it introduces some complications. So representing a resource over the wire is not something that's very, it's not something that you can just serialize into a bunch of bytes and then send over the wire. It's think of a file descriptor being a resource on a host system. Like when you manipulate the file descriptor, it's on a specific system. It's not something that you can send in a distributed way and then manipulate it in a different spot. So the WRPC interfaces, if we take a look at the store interface, the bucket is actually something that is passed in to the get function. And the way that this works, the way that this works internally with wasmCloud, is we essentially polyfill that WASI key value interface to send invocations over WRPC key value at runtime. So this is something that the host does internally so that we can represent these interfaces over the wire. But it is a temporary measure. What I wanted to point out for further discussion, then I'll pause, is that WRPC is getting a much better representation around resource design. And this is just going into the protocol directly. And this should enable us to not have to do this polyfilling of interfaces, even though from the component side, you just use WASI key value. You don't need to know that this is happening under the hood. See if I can grab chat so I can drop this for you. Vince, I think I know that I answered your initial question of like, were we using WRPC? But does this kind of point you in a good spot to do a little more digging there?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
happy to chat more about that as well. But okay, Taylor.
I was just going to point out this whole thing with Couchbase is exactly what you've probably heard if you've been in this call many times before. You heard me say, a couple others say that the whole point is what Brooks answered there at the end. You're going to have these 80% use case interfaces, which is like WASI key value, and then you're going to have the more specific stuff to expose those APIs. And so like this is really starting to show the power of the component model and something we've been talking about for a long time. Because you're able to do both. You're able to say like, okay, I can just move this around and use key value for with whatever, or if I really want to like take advantage of these more complex APIs, you have them. So just calling that out again, like this is something we've been talking about for a while, and it's the first time we've been doing it to kind of show how that all works.
Yeah, I can go for it.
Yeah, I've looking at the Couchbase capability provider and also NATS capability providers that are out there. This and also the SQL Postgres capability provider. There's some pattern emerging where you have this kind of base thing, the base interface, key value provider, for example. Then you have these extended kind of things that the capabilities that the implementation has. How do you see that evolving? Like there's a Postgres SQL provider that's specifically only for Postgres. There's no SQL-based thing in there, I think, right? So, and NATs are totally different capability providers. One technology that you could use for key value or messaging, object store, and so on. So it could also be that there's a key value, and then there's additional messaging baked into it, right? So the extended version of the key value provider. So there, I'm not sure what the best practice here is to go forward. But it could be that we have very specific kind of generic capability providers and then technology capability providers, like a more generic or a fully featured NATS capability provider that covers a lot of things. So what are the patterns that come up there for you? Or what would be that best practice?
Yeah. One thing that I feel like I realized right away when I was implementing this with Couchbase, and you probably realized it when you're implementing it with NATS KV as well, is that the APIs don't always match up one-to-one. Like in Couchbase, there's an additional notion of a tenant and a bucket in a collection, and like there are levels to it more so than just the basic capability of like getting a value at a key or atomic incrementing a thing, even though that's totally possible. I think that the interfaces that we'll use as the standard building blocks for wasmCloud applications, wasmCloud examples will be those fairly generic, general purpose, the idea of a key value capability or the idea of HTTP or the idea of a pub sub messaging system, which speaking of, there's additional a lot of new functionality landing in WASI messaging now. Maybe Taylor can give a spiel about that a little bit later. I think that it's not an attainable goal to create an interface that's perfectly generic and you also get all the specific functionality of a vendor. So in general, the pattern that I see people using is using these generic interfaces, the capabilities like key value messaging, SQL, as really nice, easy to understand abstractions for building applications. I mean, it's very, very quick, and then you get to kind of pick a capability provider off the shelf and then use that. Especially in the wasmCloud ecosystem, where you have access to NATs everywhere, you can use NATs for messaging and key value, and that's all great. And I think moving past the initial like kind of prototyping and getting it working phase, either if you're at an organization where you have a specific list of vendors that you already accept, that will help you pick a capability provider. Or when you actually need those specific bits of more advanced functionality that one specific database uses, that's a time where we can use WIT as a really powerful tool to be able to you decide a little bit more to use a particular abstraction like Postgres. But you still get a lot of the benefits of the loose coupling of capabilities around, not compiling in vulnerable open source libraries into your components, not needing to update them when you upgrade to a specific new version of Postgres. Postgres is actually a great example for that. So for the wasmCloud side, I think we're going to, of course, we're going to contribute and follow what comes out of the wasmCloud initiative. So the building blocks interfaces will definitely support firsthand. And then I think for things like Postgres, where it is just something where at the end of the day we have to pick a particular technology and we get a lot of benefits out of it. That's the direction we'll go, but it's kind of a one-off basis.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, does that match? I mean, I know that you've developed custom capability providers before, whether that was with a predefined contract or one that you made on your own. Does that kind of match where you see the line being?
Yeah, I mean, we wrote our own with definition for that, right? So to match what we need, a little slimmed down version. So I think there will be two things. One is the more generic kind of paradigm oriented capability providers like PubSub and P-Value and so on. And there's more the technology oriented capability providers like Postgres, right? Where you pick your technology and you want to interface with it. And everybody's kind of going to that interface. And that would be a good thing, right? To use that interface so you can exchange it underneath just in the Postgres world, right? Like you said, the version and so on. So I think there's room for both things, right? But it's also there will be emerging other patterns, I think, beyond that.
Yeah, I was gonna add, Yakin, one thing is that the choice should actually be on the component side. So if you think of like the most specific or most optimized provider you could write, it's always going to be able to drop down to that more generic level, right? Like to do that sort of common denominator. So you should be able to write to sort of only worry about this on the component side. Like if you want to write, you can write a minimal provider if you want to, but while you're there, it usually makes more sense to just write the sort of optimized one.
Yeah, it's a little bit like cargo where you select features. You might have this core feature, right? The baseline SQL thing in every of the specific providers, and then on top of that, you add window functions or something like that, right? That there are more kind of not 5.7 MySQL 5.7. That's just Postgres or MySQL 8. So you buy into that step by step, but that might also could make the capability provider bigger and bigger, right? So kind of code-wise. But
yeah, and
okay.
there's actually.
I think that's a.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was gonna say there's two very specific levers there. There's sort of interface organization. So like if you split up your interface correctly, it becomes really easy to sort of make the minimal version, just ignore all the other ones. Or I say minimal, but I mean sort of the common denominator version. And then the other thing is you can export. Another sort of feature that might not be clear, I think it's clear to you at this point, but maybe to other people, is that you can export multiple interfaces, right? So the same provider that's been BindGen can export the simple interface and the complex one. So they sort of live side by side. And again, it's a nice.
Yeah, so I don't want to diverge too much the conversation of philosophical thing, but I think it's important to bring it up. The ultimate interface is one function because it's just a matter of time where you're going to have way too many, right? And like you say, you can opt in for, I'm going to ignore 3 functions, but I only care about this one, why not? So I'm just going to point that out. I don't know what's the solution, but this is a recurring pattern in anywhere where you need to swap implementation. And that's why eventually everything just become one function is your dependency. Therefore, your interface is only one method. And the second thing is keep in mind that although, yes, we're talking about can we use this component in terms of interfaces, that's cool, but also make sure that the system guarantees inside are also matched, right? Because if the interface is correct and I can pass you on a screen and whatever and you may KB, right? The interface may be correct, but how you implement it and the guarantees of the system are completely different. And that personally, for me, for reliability is way more important for you to document precisely how was the guarantee of a given behavior behind an interface or the interface itself. Because that's where people go into, adopt the tool, they never understood the consequences. You, as a cloud provider, right? I'm here speaking as a wasmCloud, never make it clear what the behavior was, and now who's in fault. And that's what what happened in the past, right? A lot of people, for example, obtain for cockroach DB and never understand the distributed nature of it and how it works. And then, oh, actually, yeah, go back to Postgres. It was a mistake. It was like, it was not a mistake. Is that just because it provide you with SQL stuff didn't mean that the way it behaved was the same. So listening to you, those two things, I think is going to be extremely critical, especially the first one about the interface segregation stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the as far as the single interface, 'cause actually I'm more interested in what other people have to say. So I'll respond later, but I'd love to hear what Brooks has to say and what Dave has to say.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are taking a look at the time. We're about halfway through the call, and we have a couple other agenda items. So I would like to maybe propose kicking the rest of the discussion to the end. Just make sure we can get through the rest of the chat. Is that okay, Dave? Okay. Victor, is that all right? Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, we can definitely pick this up at the end in free discussion time. Been trying to work a little bit on time boxing these demos because they're super, I mean, it's great. We get great discussion out of them. I shouldn't be complaining about it. So taking a look at the next section in the community call, I've got a couple things that I want to call out as coming down the pipeline. I have a little bit of a demo, not too much, but this should be kind of fun around the custom capability provider template. Now, I did show the custom provider template for Rust in a previous community call. The goal of the custom provider templates is to take basically a WIT interface that has an import and an export and uses our capability provider SDK to implement that import or export implement the export and to use the import to call a linked component. Basically just kind of give you a tour around the provider SDK so that you have a good foundation to build your own capability provider. So this will actually be landing in WASH 0.29, but I want to go ahead and show you at least as a template that is linked in WASH itself. But I want to show you what this custom template looks like, because if the Go provider SDK is new to you, this will be a great starting point. So I am going to generate a new capability provider. I'm just pointing it at the new custom template that is, I think this is in a PR, just waiting on one thing in the provider SDK to land. But we can generate a custom template capability provider for Go, just like we can for our components. So if we take a look at the README, this capability provider requires you to have, of course, Go installed, WIT bindgen, WRPC, and WASH. And you can build this capability provider just using regular Go tools. So if we CD into here, we can do a Go generate to generate the WRPC bindings. So this is setting up the correct NAT subscriptions, responding to component invocations, and then we can build the provider using Go build. Maybe. Aha, this is the thing that needs to land in the provider SDK. You can build this capability provider using Go build. Now, we also have support coming down the pipeline for, and this one actually did land in WASH itself, to build these capability providers with WASH build. Now, of course, this is going to get the same error messages before, but wash build will actually do the generating of bindings for you and then build the capability provider and then package that all up into a provider archive so that you can run it. Now, the nice thing about this provider template is you can actually run it out of the box using some essentially host data, pretending to be a host. You can run it like a normal Go binary. And we also include a WADM manifest. And in both of the custom provider templates, I added a test component that actually implements the opposite WIT interface of the provider. So if we take a look at the WIT of the provider, we have two functions. I picked some very basic, I picked a very basic interface to just show a couple of different examples. But this capability provider is importing the process data interface and exporting system info. So system info has two functions that you need to implement on the provider side. And then we have a function called process data, which we can use to call a component. So the main piece of this capability provider that we show is, like I said, you have the request info function and the call function that you need to implement on the provider because you're exporting it. And inside of the provider.go function or the provider.go module, we have the implementation of request info and call. And so I've tried to annotate these custom templates, which is with as many comments as possible to talk about the reasoning behind what we're doing for each function. In the main.go function, we have our or file, we have our go generate, which will generate all of the bindings that you need to work with the provider. And then we have examples of how to override each of the handlers for, when something links to your provider, you could set up resources, establish a connection, things like that. And then the test component, which is embedded in this provider template, actually imports the interface that the capability provider exports, and it exports the interface the capability provider imports. So the way that you can run your provider and test it is by composing them together on these two interfaces. And you can use this as a test, but what the main goal here is, and what I'll touch in my documentation, is for you to be able to take this WIT interface, model it to be the capability interface that you want to implement. And then when you actually build the capability provider, you can essentially just change the code to match your interface. So you can see here, we're already, if we change the interface itself, from call to add an extra parameter, the build error that you get back from WRPC is that you should have been passing a string for this parameter. So the basic developer iteration loop for these providers going forward should be pick if you are best suited to write it in Rust or Go, modify the WIT interface to match the abstraction that you're trying to implement for your provider, and then the provider SDK and our WIT bindgen WRPC utilities will give you the right IDE error messages and functionality to be able to get you there to build the provider. So this one should be landing in an upstream again with Wash 0.29. Same with the Wash build capability for building capability providers. And it should be a really great starting point for folks building capability providers in Go. So are there any other questions or any questions on the custom template for the Go provider SDK?
Is there any how-to guide to create a provider, by the way? There was trying to follow the provider SDK for the Rust one, but I didn't see any README. So is there any up-to-date docs to generate stuff or not really?
Yeah, so this is actually what I am working on right now alongside the custom template. It's an open issue, or it's an open PR that's just in draft in the documentation repo. But the idea is that it starts with generating this provider, and then I'll guide through like modifying the WIT, what you need to change, when to run wash build, things like that. And that it can't be I think that that'll be a great base for people who are writing their own custom capability providers. All right. Well, then I think that this is most of what I wanted to talk about in terms of looking down the pipe for Wash 0.29. There's some extra support coming through for building Go providers and the extra templates. There are some great new utilities around iterating on applications. There's a new wash up flag for manifest, where you can essentially launch a host and deploy an application manifest all in one step, which is really, really nice for actually getting to just deploy an application with new infrastructure. There are additional functionality around Wash app and the new separated WADM crates, which should feel about the same on the command line, but will be a little bit nicer, especially if you're a direct user of the Wash lib crate. And I think it's probably useful to just look down the roadmap to call attention to anything new that's landed. So there are still quite a bit of issues here that are and ready for work and totally available for folks if you are looking to contribute to the Q2 roadmap. I know that this officially landed in the beginning of May, so we didn't technically have all of Q2 to complete the roadmap. But we are making really, really great progress around releasing additional packages with the Lattice client, the new OCI support in the WASM working group, and then Wash and wasmCloud will be coming across in 0.29 as well, which is really great. Now, secrets in wasmCloud, I think, is one of the biggest ticket items, and there's been some really awesome interaction in this specific this RFC here over the last week. Now we're starting with the implementation here with a NATS KV implementation for a secret store, and we're also going to be looking into like an OpenBOW/Vault secrets backend as well for us to use with wasmCloud, which will be really nice. So keep an eye out on the secrets side for some initial implementation, the MVP implementations. We're going to be doing work on the host and for the secrets backend this week and next week, and we'll see where we get. So still totally open for feedback there, but we've already gotten so much positive feedback and that it matches the use case of you also. It's really nice. So any additional things there, please feel free to speak up. Let's see. I think that was all that I had in terms of planned wasmCloud things. Taylor, if you're here, would you like to share anything on sorry to put you just totally on the spot, on the WASI messaging front? If
Yes.
not, we can share that. Okay.
So
wait.
I'm putting the PR. What? Can you not hear me?
No, I can hear
Okay.
you. I just didn't know if you were going to share.
No, I'm not going to share. I just dropped the link. Everyone else can do it. I don't need to scroll through a PR for people on this one. We're getting close on updating the messaging interface to be a little bit more clean and up to date from feedback from like our messaging interface and then other people's feedback on it. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to drop it in there. We'll be getting to that soon. And then once we get that accepted, we'll be merging that and then hopefully being able to add that into
wasmCloud. We'll probably have just backwards compatibility or an adapter. We'll decide when we get there about making sure the old stuff will just still work with the new messaging interface. So yeah, that's probably what we'll do is we'll probably have an adapter to go both directions. And then we'll probably update most of our providers to use the new interface as well. So yeah, it'll be our first time doing it. So it'll be an interesting experience just to show how we can compose it all together, but that should be coming along relatively soon. Hopefully next couple weeks. So just wanted to keep that up to date. While I'm here, we're working on adding, I mentioned this last time, we're adding support for the new OCI WASM specification. And that is going to be landing in the next version of Wash coming up here soon, as well as in a lot of the packaging tooling for from the Bytecode Alliance. So all of that should be in there. We'll have a nice standard to collaborate on with that. So look forward to seeing some more there in the coming weeks.
Alrighty, then I think we're at the end of the call. So now, totally free time. If folks have things that they wanted to mention from the wasmCloud or general WebAssembly ecosystem, now's a great time. I know that we had a couple more questions or comments around the Couchbase provider slash interface abstraction and design. So now is a great time to bring those things up again as well. Dave, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah,
there.
I think, yeah, the only thing I want to mention is what you're trying to avoid, Johan, more than anything else is siloing a bunch of providers. So if you have various development groups that are off doing, small tweaks and basically producing, one's using one database and one's using another database and things like that, that you wind up using these separate specific providers. And I think sort of as a rule of thumb, what one wants to do is, in essence, have your development group have a list of preferred providers and then a process where if you do have, one group using one, favoring one particular database, another group favoring another, at that point, you need some sort of committee or something that actually brings those together under some sort of standard custom provider that would then be a nice break and a nice interface so that everybody still winds up using somewhat the same. So you want to lean that way. It's not like you can do that all the time, but controlling that is very important. Otherwise, down the road, things get very complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is more an organizational aspect of it, like how you architect your system and how you kind of control the herd of developers picking the right provider. And I don't see actually kind of a major use case to switch from MySQL to Postgres or vice versa. So mostly you're set on one technology. It's more like the interface, the abstraction is more like taking away the mental workload for the developer. They know how they program against an interface. They know how to deal with that. They learn that interface and use it, right? And then version upgrades from Postgres 15 to 16, it's nothing changes, right? You can use it as you think it should work, right? So it's more like that. Big technology changes are rare, I guess.
Yeah, I think when it comes to this topic, far too often people chase the fantasy that, oh, because we have the same interface, we could swap the components, and that regardless of WebAssembly or not, right? And what always ended up happening is that there is some leakage from internal system capabilities and guarantees that is gonna bubble up all the way to the interface. So I don't think that making everything to look the same SQL and the same KV is the ultimate goal, although there are gonna be the 80-20 rules, that could be true. But reaching for that to be the first steps always has been a problem. And that's just based even outside WASM, like I said, just pure coding, people creating abstractions around these capabilities, right? These external services that is never a change the linker in this case and everything will work. It's never like that. Yeah, and the capabilities itself, the guarantees of the system, that is what drive the need for a given interface. It's not the other way around. Everything is a file, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if I was next or not, but I was gonna say about the originally the comment was like one function is the ultimate interface. I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. You probably want more than one. In this case, just because one thing that's nice about picking your interfaces and picking how you split it up is that you can tell something about the component just by looking at it at the WIT file. So if you have, like, let's say you had like read split off into an interface, you know that actually that component should never do a write, right? And you can do some stuff with that, which is
Yeah, but
useful.
you're
But
already making technical assumptions though. Like I understand what you're saying, but what makes you believe that my read and write from the KV will be for the exact same linker? I wanted one linker that's gonna do the write, and I want another linker to do the read. Why? You don't know. It's my decision. Maybe the read one is in a geo replicated cluster that I'm gonna read from, and the write is collocated to closer to where the data consistency have to be. Like I say, like you cannot make. I'm not right, neither wrong, right? It's you have to bring it down to what system are we building per se, and the trade-off. And once you narrow down to that, you're gonna realize that most of the time your dependency with the service is one function. In the stream case, right? In most cases, yeah, by all means, don't create 5 different linkers because it's the exact same service and you have one interface. Cool, but there's a lot of assumptions
yeah,
behind that simple decision.
yeah, that actually brings me to the second point. So as far the problem of having semantics be different is like I don't even know if that's solvable. The problems at the keyboard. I think there it's not in the computer. So, but actually, WebAssembly gives us tools that we've never had before. Sorry, at this kind of scale, because what you can do is you can write conformance tests, right? So the only way to know that something actually maintains the semantics you think it does is testing it, right? So you get a little bit more leverage than you would have had before, right? Otherwise, you're just like you have to write the conformance tests in every language, right? But WebAssembly gives you a generic, right? A just sort of generic interface over multiple things that implement the interface, and you have a little bit of you have a little bit more leverage there. But yeah, I don't think that problem is solvable. That's like the problem of just making sure 2 implementations are the same.
It
It's
is both
infinitely
way,
complex.
right? And that's why I put the emphasis on wasmCloud as a cloud provider, right? You need to make sure that the services that you're running and you're guaranteeing and whatnot, like they have to actually obey by the guarantees that we assume. So that's all I'm saying. It's like I'm right with you, but that's I'm trying to bring the attention to. Hey, don't don't forget the implementation details. Don't forget the guarantees because that's what matters at the end. And no amount of testing will help you out, except testing and in production. And what I mean by that is literally the service that's supposed to be there running for the system to work. Everything else, all we're doing is I'm gonna bet on it and I'm gonna trust that the system that says it's gonna be in production is gonna behave the way we said. Everything outside production is just a matter of how much you trust a given system, right? And hopefully it's reliable. Hopefully I can trust that the documentation was right. Hopefully you didn't change the expectations of the system and whatnot. But it's just all that. It's a trust problem.
Yeah, I think that problem's at the keyboard. Like you can't. That's just like making sure 2 systems behave exactly the same, right, for every case. That's impossible.
But
Like
if you told me
Yeah,
behave the same,
I think that
you can't do that.
I think we're getting caught in a little bit of a rabbit hole here. I think that what we're talking about here, like this fundamental problem of abstraction and trusting like a library to do what it says it does is like not specific to WebAssembly. I do think that abstracting a library in terms of WIT gives us a lot gives us a lot better ability to actually implement this once instead of, I can use Couchbase as an example. If you go to the Couchbase developer documentation, all the way down the left side is Scala SDK, Rust SDK, Go SDK, Java SDK, all of these different SDKs that implement the same functional capability of, way under the hood, they have a REST API and or a binary protocol. It's all modeled in WIT or all something that's implemented in WebAssembly. We can implement it once in the language that is best suited for, and then each of these client libraries are essentially just bindgen generated from WASM. And I know that there's a certain level of like everything is rainbows and wonderful around taking this belief, but that is the point. And I think that with Victor's idea or Victor's assertion around, you can write conformance tests for interfaces, going the it's the right way that I want to phrase this. There's an inverse relationship around abstraction and specific functionality. And as you get closer and closer to a WIT interface just being a different representation of an SDK, you run into similar problems that you run into with regular SDKs around breaking changes and versioning, and you can express all of that in WIT. And I think that it doesn't fundamentally solve all the problems, but it does give us many, many different tools to deal with that, which is really, really exciting. I went off a little bit on a soapbox, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, there's this outward kind of perspective of providing a Postgres database to everyone, and everyone subscribes to that. But there's, for us, the important selling point for WASM and wasmCloud in our company was that, we need to use NATS messaging anyway. So we can have actually a custom interface, but we write the code once in the language that we choose, right, is the best thing to do, instead of writing in C++ for the edge, writing it in Rust in the cloud or any other technology. And we write it once and you just basically import it or use it through the interface. That's a huge selling point for us, right? Not even thinking about spreading that capability provider out to the broader community, but just internally using it and kind of write code once and use it everywhere. So that was a huge selling point.
Oh, and Jochen, one thing was that remember wasmSQL was tried before, so that's one of the reasons we didn't go that path. But obviously, you still can, or anyone can. It's just
WasmSQL is dead. Long live WasmSQL. All right, folks. Well, I think we're kind of getting here to the end. We've got maybe a minute left. It's kind of at the risk of cutting off an awesome question / idea and not running over. I think we can probably go ahead and call it for today. Oh no.
One more
Don't ruin my scheduling, Liam. Yeah, go for it.
KubeCon submissions are due on Sunday. So if you are interested in submitting a KubeCon submission around wasmCloud, around WebAssembly, you should feel free to DM us on Slack if you are seeking support and assistance or collaboration. I know that I'm aware of at least maybe a dozen that are going in. It's quite a few. If you are looking for help from me, I'm all out tomorrow. I know much of the rest, I'm probably the least help, maybe except on the marketing side. But the rest of the team should be around, but I can be helpful on Saturday or Sunday if folks need some help or want some collaboration or some feedback before you hit submit. That's for KubeCon. For all of the days, WASM Day, et cetera, that will still be a few months out, and we'll make sure to highlight that for you. If you want some collaboration, just let us know, and we're always happy to help you co-draft and chat GPT the heck out of these things.
right, everyone. With that, perfect on the dot, 2 o'clock Eastern. Thanks everybody for coming today. We will go ahead and stop.